Hello and welcome back to Tactics Board. It's been a while with the festive season and the FA Cup taking place, but we're back to the formula you know and love, taking a look at the way that the game might pan out for Norwich City this weekend, as well as a predicted 11 that I think David Wagner will choose to do it. This weekend, it's Hull City, a Friday night kickoff in front of the Sky Sports cameras for Norwich, and it looks like it will be a pretty difficult task, to be honest. Hull, although they aren't in the playoff places at the moment, have had a very good season, have played some very attractive football, and we're going to get onto that and the additions that they've made, but they'll be pushing, obviously, to get into that top six. They can do that with a win. Sunderland in 6th are only 1 point ahead of them, and under Liam Rosenior, they have been a pretty good side, not only this season, but also last season. They gave Norwich a good test in the first game of the season and arguably deserved a point before Adam Ida's last gasp winner in that game, and they'll be looking to take it one step further, add a result to that performance at the MKM Stadium this weekend. So without further ado, this is the 11 that I think David Wagner will choose to start the game. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Grant Hanley at centre back, Dimitris Yannoulis at left back, Kenny McLean and Gabriel Sara in the centre of midfield, with Jonathan Rowe on the right, Borja Sainz on the left, and Ashley Barnes and Josh Sargent up front. I thought George Long actually had a pretty good game against Bristol Rovers in that 1-1 draw in the FA Cup. I thought he was quite unlucky to have conceded, and there were a fair few mistakes in front of him that left him exposed, but he pulled off some great saves, and it was good to see a confidence building performance from him after he sort of struggled towards the end of his time playing Gunn's deputy when he was out injured. But I expect the Scot to come back into the team. He's been very good ever since he came back, and in contrast to a lot of his teammates, he's had a pretty good season, and he's the one that David Wagner trusts, so I bank on him being in goal. In Yorkshire, right back, I've gone for Jack Stacey. I don't think Kellen Fisher really did especially well in the FA Cup. He's sort of struggled in his last few appearances and maybe pushed the case that he needs a little bit of game time on loan. Although Wagner trusts him to sort of play that deputy role, he is struggling for minutes at the moment, and Stacey is clearly the one he trusts. So I think we'll see the former Bournemouth right back and the summer signing come back into the team. Although he hasn't quite been himself from the summer, I think he had a period between sort of December and the first couple of months of the season where he was really, really poor. I think he's improved a little bit from that, but we're still yet to see the heights that he hit in his first few games in a Norwich shirt. Hopefully he can get back to that, and I would suggest Wagner will trust him to do that against Hull. At centre-back, I've gone for Shane Duffy and Grant Hanley, and this was sort of a difficult choice for me because the centre-back group that Norwich have at the moment doesn't really completely fit in any way. You look at Ben Gibson for the distribution, but then does he have the pace to really play the high line that Wagner likes? At times, not really, but then you look at some of the other players in that team, and they also struggle with that athleticism. Duffy and Hanley are both ones that struggle with the distribution, and we know how important that is to Wagner. It's so important, in fact, that he moved his most reliable midfield player in Kenny McLean back into the back line so that they could pass it out from the back a little bit easier. So there are a few dilemmas facing Wagner, but I just think Grant Hanley has been pretty solid since he came back in, has impressed, especially in that Southampton game, and as the club captain, as somebody who Wagner played week in, week out before he suffered that Achilles injury towards the back end of last season, it feels unlikely that he's dropped. And it's the same with Duffy, really, apart from when he's really needed a rest or when he's been suspended, he's been in that Norwich team. And although I don't necessarily like the look of that pairing from a distribution and in possession point of view, we know how important it is to Wagner to defend solidly. And if you're going to sit back, and I think that may be the case because of how Hull play, Duffy sort of plays into that, and that centre-back duo plays into that. So within the constraints that they've got, I think he'll go for Hanley and Duffy, although I know that isn't perfect, and I know fans maybe won't love that. At left-back, I've gone for Dimitris Yannoulis, and I actually think personally that Sam McCallum deserves that spot. He's done pretty well in the last few weeks, aside from a pretty poor showing against West Brom. But other than that, he's been pretty consistent, pretty good. but we know Yanulis is the first choice. He's now back from injury. He played in that Bristol Rovers game, albeit with a face mask to protect the facial injury that kept him out for a couple of weeks. And if there hadn't been such clear signs of how much Wagner prefers him up to this point, I probably would have said McCallum, because I think most people would see that his performances in the last few weeks have been better than Yanulis. And although he was coming back from injury, I was quite disappointed with how he played in that FA Cup game. But just based on Wagner's own preferences, and a lot of these videos do come down to that, obviously. And I think I've spoken before about how maybe I would choose slightly different things to what the German is, but based on my prediction for what he will do, Yanulis has absolutely been the first choice this season, and I've gone for him at left back. In midfield, it's hard to dispute Kenny McLean and Gabriel Sara, and although there does seem to be a significant yearning from various quarters for the signing of a defensive midfielder this month, I think Darren Eadie went as far as suggesting that they needed one, or that he expected to see one in his programme notes recently. So that is clearly an area that Norwich know they're struggling with, and although Wagner does prefer to have players of a different mould in that midfield, I think anybody who's watched them could tell that was the case. I think for now, without anybody else in the building, aside from Jakob Sorensen, who I think Wagner still wants to get some minutes with the under-21s, it's hard to see how you could really include anyone of that mould, and we know how good McLean and Sara have been. That does mean Nunez dropping out after some impressive showings in the league, but you can't really afford to drop either of those two at the moment, and I have gone for them. In midfield, on the right, Jonathan Rowe, who you can't really dispute. Obviously, Norwich's top scorer at the moment, generating quite a lot of speculation about his future, although including the year option that the club have, he does still have 2.5 years left to run on his contract. So that is a situation they appear to be fairly relaxed about, and negotiations will pick up later on in the season. But in the here and now, there's absolutely no question over whether he is in Norwich's best 11, and I'd expect to see him come back in after a rest from the starting 11 against Bristol Rovers. On the left, I've gone for Sargent, who wasn't especially good in the Cup, but does just show those signs of danger and a bit of urgency that I think Norwich have lacked. There have been times when they've been struggling to create in an absolutely huge way, and he's the one that's buzzing around trying to make things happen. And I've been crying out for Norwich to get that player for the last few months, to get somebody who's desperate to get the ball, who wants to take hold of a game. And although Sargent isn't perfect, he probably does need to work on his consistency on the ball a little bit. I think his energy is so refreshing, especially in an ageing and at times quite slow and boring to watch team, to be honest with you. And in a team that I don't think Norwich fans love watching at the moment, he's one player that does get them off their feet. So I'd hope that he's included, and based on Wagner's team selections in recent weeks, as well as the Spaniards' performances, I'd expect that he would be. And up front, it's finally the reunion in the Championship of Josh Sargent and Ashley Barnes. And I thought Sargent actually brought the best out of Barnes in that cup game. I was surprised to see Barnes involved from the start. You'd have thought that Wagner might use that as an opportunity to sort of rest the 33 or maybe 34 now, and sort of give him a little bit of time out. But my thinking behind maybe why he would have done that would have been to try and get that partnership back going again before they head into this important game at Hull, and I actually thought it worked really well. Sargent looked fantastic before he came off in a pre-planned change, and Barnes actually looked the best he has since Sargent's been out with injury, to be honest. So good signs for both of them, and because of how much they've been in the team, how much better they look together, and how essential they've been when they've both been in the team, it's hard to suggest that they won't both start. When it comes to predicting how long Sargent might last before coming off, it's quite hard, because we know Wagner likes to sort of slowly build players up when they've been out for a long period of time. But equally, Barnes was one of those players a couple of months ago, and he ended up playing more than 90 minutes. So if Sargent is on his top level, which we have seen in the last couple of weeks, then maybe he does get a significant extended period of game time, although it could be the case that Wagner's cautious. But from the start, I've gone for Barnes and Sargent up front. Now on to Hull and the test that they may provide. Now this season they have played a pretty attractive brand of football. They've dominated possession. They've looked to pass into the area and create chances that way. And they've got a lot of good technical players. They've just recruited Fabio Carvalho, who was called back to Liverpool from his loan at RB Leipzig, where he actually started in their most recent Champions League game and has come to the Championship to play for Liam Rosenior's side. And the whole head coach has been pretty clear about the fact that he believes that's to do with their playing style. So clearly it's something they take pride in. You'd be surprised if they sort of just abandoned it for a game, especially against a sort of mid-table side like Norwich are at the moment. But equally that could play into City's hands. They have got some decent results against better teams that play that sort of style. I'm thinking Ipswich, Southampton, Leeds earlier on in the season. Yes, they lost 3-2, but they were 2-0 up and arguably should have guarded against losing that game. So they have proven themselves capable of getting results against those sort of teams. The only thing that I wonder is whether they try and push a little bit more given the level of opposition. Of course, Hull are pushing for the playoffs, but they're not in that bracket. You'd put them with Ipswich, Leeds and Southampton, maybe even Leicester, who Norwich played a pretty respectful style of football against as well. So if Norwich feel they need to go and get 3 points, then you might see something slightly more adjusted, maybe a little bit more open than there was against Southampton when they conceded 75% of possession. But we know David Wagner's ideals, and although I know a lot of people don't love them, just being realistic and pragmatic, it feels like, again, away from home, he might try and adopt the same ploy, try and go through Sargent and Rowe and try and counter-attack. And they have been pretty good at doing that to an extent. Now, whether they're good enough to do that against a whole team that will back themselves, that are in decent form and that have made a couple of good signings in both Carvalho and Billy Sharp, who obviously has a lot of experience at this level, even if he might have lost a couple of yards, I'm not sure whether there is enough tactically and technically to be able to do that. Of course, we hope that they do, and you can follow every kick of that game at pinkun.com/subscribe to find more details how to become a Pinkun Plus subscriber for loads of exclusive columns and exclusive live coverage of this whole game. So if you go in there, we'll see you there. If not, I'm sure you'll be watching on TV. Thank you for watching this. Keep your eyes locked on Pinkun channels, and I'll see you soon.